This is WTF Wednesday. I think I would class this one under weird things found. I was new into an organisation and looking at some cost trackers, and I could see the tracking of budget and actual costs on a timed basis, but nothing about forecast. And it took me a while to work it out, but eventually I realised that the reason why there were no forecasts in these cost trackers is that it was only being done once a year. So as part of the annual budget planning exercise, a bunch of cost forecasts would be prepared for the following year, typically around September, October time, and put into finance. Finance would then take a look at them and approve those forecasts as budget, send them back to the project manager. So in the cost tracker, you've just got budget, the amount that finance have said that we're allowed to spend, but no reforecasting happening. So to my mind, it makes sense for projects to reforecast for the remainder of the project based on what they've experienced in the earlier stages. What's your view on?
The default behaviour is as soon as you get some actuals in, you reforecast for what's coming. I mean, it also suggests to me that there's a lack of ownership on the part of the project managers in terms of actually doing that financial management aspect. They're given a budget and then they're just tracked against how that's spent, but they're not actually owning or monitoring or controlling that aspect of the project management.
Most organisations capture actuals on a sort of monthly basis. So when those actuals come in, I think there's value for the project manager in looking at the difference between the actual and the forecast and working out why that would be. So it might be that piece of work simply costs less to do than you expected, because maybe the day rate for the person doing that piece of work is less than you thought, or they were able to complete it sooner than you first thought. But equally, say, for example, you were expecting them to start at the beginning of the month and they didn't start until halfway through. That would come back as an actual lower than expected, which you might interpret initially as good news from a cost perspective. But from a timing perspective, it's not so good because it means the activity started late. But then you've got to think through the implications of that. So if the activity started late, is the activity overall going to cost the same amount as we originally thought, but just happen later? Or is the activity going to cost more or less than we originally thought, and what does that do for the overall cost of the project? So there's a number of things that
timeline as well. Does that mean your timeline's going to shift straight away?
But all of those things involve reforecasting as you go for the remainder of the project based on what you've experienced so far in the project.
From an invoicing operational financial perspective, if you haven't had costs come in the month that you were expecting, it doesn't mean you're not going to get those costs. You actually need to be accruing for it in a future period, particularly in an organisation that maybe needs to monitor its cash flow quite carefully. If you're just leaving it, how do you know?
So that forecasting activity can help the finance department get an early warning of amounts that are coming in future months and enable them to make sure that there's cash in the bank to pay those amounts when they come in. Yes.
Particularly important if you're coming up to a quarter end or a year end as well, because a lot of organisations want to know what is going to hit us this quarter, what is going to hit us this financial year. And if you're not reforecasting, how do you have that information?
What needs to happen is that, yes, you have a budget figure, and yes, you would record the actuals incurred to date, but then the project manager needs to be reforecasting what happens to the remainder of the project, so the estimate to complete either for the whole project or for the financial period, so say for a financial year if the project spans more than one financial year, so that you can predict what the outturn is going to be at the end of the project or the end of the financial reporting period, the estimate at completion. If you're aggregating that across a whole project portfolio, you know how much the whole portfolio is going to cost the organisation in a given timescale. So weird things found, lack of cost reforecasting. I was a bit surprised by that. If you want to know where you'll end up, you need to be reforecasting regularly in the light of what you've incurred so far.